Today I have my client Asia in for a brand new set of classic lashes. This is actually only her second time getting lash extensions, so we're pretty excited. I did not do her lashes last time, so we'll see what she thinks. Okay, so to assess her lashes and her eye shape and face shape and all that stuff, I'm gonna get pretty detailed today. And you'll notice that I already have put a few dots on her eye, so I'm gonna explain to you why I've done that, how I'm gonna mix curls, and what style of lashes I believe would best suit her. Okay, so before we get into all the details, just go ahead and click that like, subscribe, and ring the bell. It helps us out so much so that we can always bring fresh lash content your way. So to assess Asia's eyes, first thing I'm gonna point out is her eye shape. She has a very unique shape. As you can see, her eyes open very, very wide in the middle and then tilt downward on the outer corner. So for Asia today, just given her face shape, her eye shape, her eyebrows, and the space between her lash line and her eyebrows, I'm gonna go ahead and say that we're gonna work with a squirrel mapping. And here's why. So as you can see, everyone has, of course, a downward tilt to their eyes on the outer corners, but Asia's is a little more extreme in that it opens very wide in the middle and then quickly transitions into that swoop on the outer corners. So if we did a cat eye, which is kind of the look that we would ideally do for Asia, because as you can see, she has space on the side. If we look at her whole face, she has a bit of space on the side of her face that we can fill in. And we're gonna roll with the arch of the eyebrow as well, just to elongate. But the reason why I'm choosing squirrel is because I can give that cat eye finish, but without drooping down the lashes on the outer corners. Because if I went ahead and did my longest lengths on those outer corners, then instead of lifting the eye up and swooping it out like this, then instead I'm going to elongate that downward swoop and just make it much more extreme. So we don't want to do that. We want to give her that really nice liner swoop, but without drooping the eye. So there are a few things that I have to take into account when I'm planning her out. I can't just go in and do the same curl all across the board. Why? Because Asia has different lifts to certain parts of her natural lashes. So in her middle section here, her lashes lift, I would say, moderately. But on the inner and outer corner, they literally point down. So I need to get creative with my curls here. And on top of that, if you can just look closely here, Asia has a fold, just a little fold of skin that goes over the crease of her eye here. And that kind of hides the lash line a little bit. So given the fact that her lashes point down in that area and she has that fold of skin that we're gonna kind of hide with the lash extensions, what I'm gonna do in this area here is work with a D-curl. And I would say normally if I were just assessing her eye shape, I would say I would work with shorter lengths in there. Because if I work with shorter lengths, then it's going to be more of a wisp and a swoop toward the end. But in this particular case, because we do have that little fold of skin there, I'm gonna work with a little bit of longer lengths. I think I might put a few 7s just on the very inner corner, and then right into 8s, 9s, 10s, and so on. So that's how I'm gonna be planning that out. So what I'm gonna do is take my Sharpie, and I'm gonna put a dot where I believe the lashes start to point upward. And look straight ahead. I always get my clients to look straight ahead when I'm planning this out. So at this point, where I just put my dot, her lashes start to tilt upward, whereas before they were pointing downward. So that is just showing me where my D curl will go, and then where I'll transition into C or CC curl. Now, it's gonna get a little bit tricky here because I'm gonna wanna blend throughout this section here, because instead of working with a D into a CC, which would be a much more seamless transition, I'm gonna work with a C curl in this area. Why? Because her eyes are already super lifted here and the lashes are fairly uplifted already. So I'm gonna swoop that area out in order to blend the outer corner and bring attention to that area by using a C curl. So I'm gonna go D curl, C curl to about right here where her eye starts tilting back down. And then from there, I'm gonna go with a CC and D curl blend. D curl is gonna be on the bottom layer in this section to lift everything up. The CC curl is going to be to swoop it out. So because her lashes point down, I'm gonna be able to work with longer lengths. So I'm gonna work with a 12, 13, and 14 feathering blend in this area here. And then here, I think I may actually stick to about a 10 and 11, I would say, mix here in C curl. And then I'm gonna look at it as I go with my lash inspection mirror and see how I have to blend this particular area here in order to make it work. I may have to do a few 11s, or I may have to just mix a few different curls together, alternating them as I work, and then playing around with some layers as well. That is definitely a little more on the advanced side, but it's gonna be so fun once it's done. And I just wanna make a note on where I also want to start directing the lashes up on the outer corner. Again, this is a classic set, so I will be working pretty heavily with direction. And majority of my direction is going to be going this way to point everything out, as already explained. So at about this point here, I'm gonna start directing things up. Why am I gonna start doing that? It's just so I can lift that outer corner in order to roll with the swoop. So in this little tiny section right here, that's my emphasis area. In this area, I'm gonna work heavily with direction in order to make it look like a cat eye. But again, on those outer corners, everything's gonna be lifted up so that I don't elongate the down tilt of her eye. All right, let's get lashing. So now that I've finished Asia's lashes, I just wanted to run through what I ended up doing for blending this section right here, where we transitioned from C to D and from lengths 10 into lengths 12. And I quickly go 12, 13, 14. So automatically my sections will want to blend together anyways, just because the eye does go from a pretty flat surface here in this area to a downward tilt. So if we take the tilt into consideration, then we do get about a millimeter of wiggle room in this section anyway. So when I jump from a 10 to a 12, it's kind of like jumping from a 10 to 11. But when taking the lash layers into consideration as well, then it gets a little more tricky. So here's how I ended up blending that section together for a seamless transition. So firstly, as I've already talked about earlier, I wanted to direct all my lashes this way. So I continued with that, even in my section here. That just offered more of a sweep and pulled the eyes a little bit further apart while sweeping the outer corners and elongating her eye. So I did that pretty much the entire way across the eye, like this. And that's what I mean with direction. When I direct out, I'm directing to sweep. When I direct up, like I chatted about earlier on this outer corner here, these lashes, in order to prevent doing this with the lash extensions, that would, yes, elongate her eye, but not in the way that we're going for. We wanted lift and sweep. We didn't want it to droop lower on those outer corners. So when I speak about lift, what I meant was, in this section, so when I talked about directing up on the outer corners, here's what I meant. In this section, instead of directing out like the others, I directed up, like this. And they actually blended together lovely. Because of the tilt of her eye, the sweeped lashes actually formed a cat eye look, and these lashes on the end helped lift that corner up toward that sweep instead of drooping it down. So that's what I mean about direction when I was talking about directing everything up in that area. Now, when it came to the layers, take a look down here. So this section, as already discussed, transitioning between that emphasis area and the middle of the eye, how I worked with really blending it was not only just relying on that downward tilt, but playing with layers. So in this area, say I was using my 12 millimeters. In this area was my 10. And 12D is much more uplifted than 10C. So it's kind of a funky transition. So what I did was, say right here, I worked with a 12D on the top layer, and then on the second layer, moving over a little bit, I put that 12D on the middle layer. And then moving over a little bit further, I put my 12D on the bottom layer. And I continued this pattern for a little while, just for a couple millimeters of the eye in total. Maybe 10 lashes in total would have been 12D. That would have kind of blended those areas together. And then in between those, I took my 10C, which we'll call pink, and I did the opposite. So I put my 10C on the bottom layer, moved over a little bit in the middle, moved over a little bit on the top, bottom, middle, top. And then by doing this, they really meshed together and gave that feathered, textured look that blended the two sections and curls together very nicely. All the way over to 12, 13, and 14 mix, and then back down to 11 and 10 on those outer corners. I will put the mapping at the end of this video as well for you to go ahead and take a screenshot. And by all means, if you have any more questions about this set, go ahead and comment below. I love answering questions and just chatting lashes. Hope to hear from you guys soon.